Okay. All right. Jesse, first of all, your reaction when you heard about the passing of Russ Francis.
I was shocked. I got a text from Ed Francis Jr. Letting me know when I was catching my flight back after the Niner game, and because when he came to our alumni things, he looked pretty healthy, and I didn't know what it was, and I had to text him twice when he said it was a plane crash, and I had to text him twice to make sure it was for real, but unfortunately. The one thing about Russ is, when we used to have camp in Rockland, which you're familiar with, Rick, uh, sometimes Russ would invite Joe and Bruce Colley to fly with him from Sacramento to San Francisco to the preseason game instead of driving, and Bill Walsh wouldn't have anything to do with it. But that's just Russ. He was a maverick. He was a fun-loving guy. That kind of took a little bit of the edge of the old way of training camp, and we loved him for that. As long as he performed on the field on Sunday, and I miss him as a big brother because obviously when I came in as a draft choice from the University of Hawaii, he was natural for him to take me under his wing, just that Ohana spirit that we had together. So I miss that about him.
In fact, I saw you put on Twitter or X, RIP Big Bro. Talk to me about how he took you under his wing.
Well, there's not many 11th round draft choices that make the NFL. And, of course, I'm nervous. I was at UH when I saw, the 49ers won the first Super Bowl in 81. And sometimes you can't believe you're in the same locker room with Joe Montana and Dwight Clark and those guys. But, Russ just, sat me down and said, hey, Jess, you're here because you're good enough to be, and respect everybody, but don't fear anyone. Just go out there and win yourself a job. And if you need any help, you let me know. Although that Thanksgiving prank that all the rookies have of getting the turkey, he set me up with that one. So even though he was my big bro, he didn't leave tradition. He wanted to make sure that I bid on that by giving me his letter to go and get a free turkey for Thanksgiving, even though there were no turkeys given. But that was a fun-loving Russ, and Bill's very familiar with our lifestyle in Hawaii and how easygoing it is, and Russ represented all of that because Bill Walsh was friends with a lot of the guys from Hawaii, like Mike Vasconcelos and those guys. So Bill understood a little bit of the culture and how laid back we are. And I was more serious than Russ ever was, but he was a lot more established than I was when I first came out. So I just followed his lead.
Of course, Howard Cosell called him all world and everything. Just tell me how talented this guy was.
He was first tight end that was about 6'5", 6'6", that could run. I just remember the funny story, Rick, is when they played the Raiders, the old bad Raiders. They had a middle linebacker named Phil Villapiano that bloodied Russ with a hit. Those days you can hit, in the face from the top of your helmet. And Russ was all bleeding and things like that. And it was kind of a dirty shot. So Russ was telling me the story that when he and Phil were both selected to the Pro Bowl, Phil came and they made up, but in Russ's mind, it's not completely done. So Russ invited Phil to go on a plane ride with him. So they flew over Honolulu, and all of a sudden, up in the ocean, Russ just tipped the plane this way and turned it this way, and where Phil was on the bottom of the plane screaming his head off. And Russ did that on purpose just to pay him back for the bloody nose that he suffered in the game. And I thought it was funny because Russ said, I've never heard a Raider linebacker scream like that before in his life. So that is Russ. We used to have camp in Rockland, and, Russ was holding out a little bit for more money. And all of a sudden we're doing 9-on-7 drills, and here comes this plane. Like, it kind of threatened the tower that filmed our practice. And everybody knew that Russ was going to do it because we all heard about it the night before, except the coaches. So that was Russ. That's what he brought to the team. And obviously Super Bowl 19 with us, played a big role in that. And he's someone that inspired me to want to become a champion and set that standard of expectation. And that's how I went on to win 3 more Super Bowls because of him. So I look at him as a big brother, and that's the way I look at him.
Um, yeah, just how tough was this guy? And you mentioned he's like 6'5", what, 230, I guess, and he could run as well. Just how tough was he out there on the field?
I mean, he was really tough. You know, growing up in Kalihi, Rick, I remember growing up when this is back then, when during the off season, Russ would come home and he would use his popularity to help his dad and his brother promote wrestling. So Russ during the off season would come and tag team with his brother Billy Francis, and that was a popular thing. I mean that it used to be called HIC back then, but the Neil Blaisdell Arena used to be sold out, and a big part of that because of Russ, an NFL player, All Pro from the New England Patriots that came in and wrestled. And then we did a camp at Farrington, and I remember we had a lot of local guys that played on other teams, but because of Russell's popularity in football and in wrestling, I mean, all the kids migrated to him, and I was a young junior at Farrington at the time. So part of that is when I walked into the 49er locker room and he kind of came over to my locker and took me under his wing. I'm still looking at him as this big celebrity that I saw at Farrington High School, where all the kids migrated for his autograph. And, there's a reason why I call him my big brother. I was so honored to be inducted with him in the same class. With him, guys I looked up to, Russ Francis and Mosi Tatupu. You talk about legendary names in high school football in Hawaii. For me to just be in that same class with them was really, truly an honor.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I just found out this morning that you guys were in the same class. Uh, of course, though, Russ didn't have any Polynesian blood in him, but he's still in the Polynesian Hall of Fame.
Yes, it's his contribution.
Yeah.
We were the first Hall of Fame to add the word contribution to a community into our Hall of Fame. And Russ was so strong that he was the first one to go in from that standpoint. So, and you notice the NFL has adopted that now. There are people that go in as contributors to what they've done for the game of football. And I think for the NFL, it started like 3 or 4 years ago. So we're proud to have Russ as the guy that went in and what he did make a difference in the lives of youngsters like myself and those who followed me. That's something that will always be missed. And every time I see him at our events with the San Francisco 49ers, even though he lives elsewhere, I always look at him as a big brother from Kailua High School.
And he always seemed to carry that spirit of aloha with him too, given the shaka and all that kind of stuff. Talk to me about that.
He does. It's almost like I wish I had a little bit of him in me. I'm a local boy and we're all laid back, but when it comes to football, I was a lot more serious than he was. Russ was just sometimes some of the things that he's done. We would have curfew at Rockland, and Russ a half hour after curfew, instead of sneaking in, he would come in his Harley, really loud in the parking lot. I think he did it just because Bill was such a disciplinarian, Bill Walsh was, and Russ just did it purposely to bring some looseness into our locker room, because that group, nobody, anytime people thought about that generation, the dynasty generation of 49ers, it was our ability to be businesslike. Well, there was a Russ Francis within the mix of that businesslike approach. And sometimes it was nice for us to realize that, there's a lot of pressure for us to win it every year because we've earned the right to say Super Bowl or bust. But Russ brought a little bit of relaxation to say, hey, at the end of the day, this is still a game, and we need to enjoy it.
Okay. Anything else you want people to know about Russ that maybe hasn't come out yet about him?
Well, he contributed a lot to our society. I remember growing up too. He did all those commercials with Melvin Lead back in the day, and inspired me to say, hey, I want to do commercials too one day. And if I work hard, I can be like him. And, I ended up doing, some commercials when we were winning Super Bowls with Bank of Hawaii, Chevrolet and some of those. So a lot of the motivation that I got, was from watching him. That if you work hard, it doesn't matter where you come from. Just stay humble, and you can also accomplish your dreams. And I was able to do a lot of those things. So when I was filming those commercials, I was like, wow, I'm doing what Russ Francis used to do, because I used to watch it back in the day growing up in Kalihi.
Yeah. Let me ask you about this. I know in the Super Bowl, he had a big game that against the Dolphins, 5 catches for 60 yards. Anything you remember about him during that game at all? I mean, working the offensive line. Any memories of that game come to mind?
Well, if you remember, Rick, that Dolphins offense was considered the very best. They had, like, I think Marino threw for 4,000 yards in the days when the rules were different. It's a completely different game now. There's guys that throw for 4,000 yards now, and they consider that a great season. That offense was a number one offense. Our offense, I think, was number 3 or 4. But the way we put that game away and ran away with that game when people thought Miami was going to come in and beat us, a lot of it had to do with Russ Francis's play, getting us some first downs when we needed it on 3rd and 7. Everybody's paying attention to Freddie Solomon and Dwight Clark. But Russ was a guy that kept driving going for us. And then he had that long reception for a touchdown. And there's no question in the history of the San Francisco 49ers and the fact that one of the most renowned announcers ever on Monday Night Football, Howard Cosell, called him Old World. That is something that's very, very special, because it just doesn't happen to everybody.
And to wrap it, how do you think he would want to be remembered?
Knowing Russ is someone that lived his life in his own terms, and you can be successful doing it your own way, because the way we look at it from society is, you got to put in the work. You can't, you can't play around. It's not that Russ played around. It's like when Russ was going to live his life, and it's not all about football. But when it comes to football, he will put that focus of that 6 months into that. But at the end of, as soon as the season is done, Russ was going to live his life. Motorcycle riding all over the mountains in Hawaii, on the Big Island. He goes flying, all over. Like I said, I wish I had a little bit of him in me, because, my life is more of a structured one. Russ was one that enjoyed his life, and I admire that a lot, the way he did it, because he did it his way and still found success, not only as a world champion on the football field and an all-pro, but also the things that he did off the field, and also gave back to kids of our community. So from that, I'm very, very proud to be associated with him.
Very good. That's great, Jesse. So good to catch up with you and have you share a few words about Russ. I know he's a really special guy. I got to know him a little bit when I came in to San Francisco in 1987. It's the last year there. So I got to talk to him a little bit, and I showed him, hey,
you would have enjoyed it. You would have enjoyed it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording here.